one of the founders that I was helping, they built the product without talking to many customers. They bootstrapped it. They had like development team building the product and all those things. And guess what? No one wanted to buy that product because you did not speak to customers. And now they are trying to start from scratch. So I'm helping and guiding them to like who are your target customers are. They are trying to find who I can tap into. And I want founders to think about 6 months, I'm going to interview customers. So that's one of the goals. Interview at least 500 customers if you can, 1,000 customers, as much as you can. So that way you have different perspective and what are you learning from those interviews, right? So I try to help them identify the categories. And sometimes founders like, oh, I'm seeing the pattern, like 60% of the customer have the same issue and there is no solution to that.
Welcome to Productside Stories, the podcast where we reveal the very real and raw lessons learned from product leaders and thinkers all over the world. I'm your host, Rina Alexin, CEO of Productside. Let's dive into today's episode. And today I'm joined by Shweta Agrawal, a seasoned product leader whose career spans Philips and Bright Cove. And she's now an advisor to startups in the Boston area through organizations such as Techstars. She's also a founding member of Gilder and is the chief product officer at Boston New Technology. Congratulations, Shweta. I hear you're also recognized as a top 40 under 40 by Boston Business Journal. That's really exciting. And I'm excited to talk to you today about how you're helping startups shape strategy to get to product market fit and to scale through an intentional go-to-market plan. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much, Rina. Wow, that was a wonderful introduction. I'm super excited to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. And I always start the same way because I hear something new every time I ask this question. Shweta, how did you get into product management? Can you share your journey with us?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, fun story. I grew up in India, and as a kid, I was like, oh, I want to be a neurosurgeon. I wanted to be a doctor so that I can change and help people and save their lives. And I was really fascinated about brain and how complex and powerful it is. So it was less about medicine, but more about people. And I realized along the way, and I discovered that I get dizzy when I see the blood. So I was like, oh God, I can't do, what should I be doing now? So as I was exploring, one path closed, but another path opened up. So I studied computer science in my undergrad. And then I came to Boston. I did my business study, and I was like, I didn't want to sit behind the laptop. I was like, I don't want to keep on programming, and nothing wrong with that. But I was like more of wanted to go out and talk to people and understand them and interact with them, and that's what led me to product management. So I started work. I did like some internship when I was studying, and then I started working at Philips Health Tech, and I was managing the North America multi-million dollars of product. That's when I realized I was talking to tons of stakeholders, I was talking to customers, and I realized this is what I wanted to do. So with the help of product, I was able to change people's life, build something that people really wanted and that will, in their daily lives. So since then, I've worked in the, Philips Celtech and many different other startup companies where I was able to use my product management knowledge and help them scale.
I love that. When it comes to products, and that's actually one of the things that I really love about being part of product side is the ripple effect.
Yeah.
It's when you're a doctor, you absolutely, no question, you have a lot of impact on a lot of people. But at the same time, when you're working on product, there's a lot of people consuming those products. So yeah, so you have a lot more ability to have the ripple effect, right, of having the products.
Yeah.
And I would imagine in your seat now as a advisor, that's exponentially has grown, right, in terms of what you yourself can do as an individual.
It has. Like when I was working in the corporate world, Serena, like I was very curious. I'm a curious person in general, and I started talking to the founders. And for 10 plus years now, I've been a startup advisor. So I work with founders on, early stage, mid stage, growth stage, but from different industries. So that has also helped me to define, like, okay, in health tech and fintech, edtech, what it means, how the founders are thinking, what problem they're trying to solve. And when I see that ripple effect, as you mentioned, I'm like, okay, like some founders are trying to solve problems in the US, some of them are trying to solve problems globally. So it's having impact and people can see that. And when you see that actually it's helping them day in, day out, you feel like, okay, you are adding and helping in some way.
Yeah, well, that's actually a lot of different varieties of products that you're talking about here. Let's actually dig into a little bit here. I heard you say you advise people who are startups, but also in the enterprise place. I mean, that's really different environment. So, can you maybe share what's different about launching a product in an enterprise environment versus the startup?
Yeah, so I'll give you a few bullet points, which I think, and given I have worked in the enterprise and I have worked in the mid to small startup companies like 200 people company, 500 people. So I have also experienced myself, and I'm also working with the founders who are in both those early stage and mid stage. So few things when you think about launching in an enterprise, right? Like for example, the resources, like as an enterprise you have the budget, you have tons of resources, like the engineering team, data scientists, product folks, marketing and sales. Whereas the startups, sometimes the founders, let's say if they're in early stage, they're bootstrapping, so they're putting the money in. They can't hire like 10 people right away, so they have to find something like some tools or how they can wear multiple hats. So that's something I have seen. The second part, the processes. So for example, in enterprises, when I was working in those big companies, we had to go through processes. Even if I'm launching a small feature, it will take approvals and the features, making sure I have like thorough PRDs and all those things. It will take like 6 to 8 months to even launch a simple feature. Whereas in startups, you will launch like 3 to 4 features. I mean, again, after you're doing product market fit, you have that customer wants. It will be super fast. Even though in the enterprises, I've seen people hybrid, oh yeah, agile and waterfall and all those things. I have seen it takes time for the enterprise to launch something, whereas in startups, it was super fast. The third thing is risk tolerance. I mean, enterprises are they are very calculate. They want to take risks, but they don't want to impact their reputations, right? So, for example, companies, even if they want to launch something, they will do a calculated risk. If I want to launch an AI feature, and I'll give some examples as well, but they want to be very calculated. Whereas startups, they're like, oh, we'll launch fast and we'll see if it works. Great if it does not. So they're very in the pilot mode, I would say. The fourth one is timeline. As I mentioned, it's longer for the enterprises and faster for the startups, and that's what I love. I think many companies now, enterprises are thinking of creating teams internally to have a startup mode where they don't have to wait for the approvals, just act as a startup and launch things and pilot out. The fifth and the last is the marketing focus. So when as an enterprise they are launching, they have the whole marketing team, the marketing campaign, they will be spending money on the ads and everything. Whereas in startups, I have seen it's more of like, oh, do I know my network? Do I know my leads from the LinkedIn, or do I go to an events and start generating those leads? So there are different channels where the startup founders can tap into.
Well, I have to say, I agree with you about a lot of these larger enterprises. They always try to create, I don't know, labs or entrepreneurship experiments. I've experienced it myself in enterprise, and they all want to create this sandbox without all of these approvals and speed time to market, but they get a lot of things also wrong. One, it still ends up being meetings and approvals, and someone needs to, because of the risk tolerance that you mentioned, that still exists in that world. And then the other one is often there's still these enterprise requirements that are missing, where even if something is truly developed, it's not able to be, the ROI isn't really revealed because they can't, add it to their system for some reason. But let's actually talk a little bit about the early stage companies right now. I'm curious, given that you're advising a number of different companies with, I'm sure, a lot of different problems, are there any common challenges that founders are currently facing?
I love that question, Rina, because I have seen a pattern or trend among founders. They are facing the same problem, whether they are from same industry or different industry, health tech, fintech, edtech, insurtech. So common trends I've seen, as we all know, AI is here. So everyone wants to use AI. First thing I've seen is founders are trying to launch feature fast. They or the product fast. They were like, oh, I have an idea. I'm going to launch my product like in 2 months. And I'm like, have you, 2 months is too fast. Like, where is your alpha, beta, MVP stage? And they're like, no, I just want to launch my. So without talking to customers, they're just wanting to launch because now there are tons of tools like available.
Wait, pause.
Yeah.
Pause there. Are you actually telling me that there are founders who they're getting pressure to launch without talking to customers, not following like iterative development? Okay, tell me
Yeah.
more about
So,
this.
yeah. Okay. So I don't know if this is gonna get recorded, but like, so I have spoken to a couple of founders, and they have an idea. I was talking to one founder like, yeah, last week. So this founder, they have website, everything all developed and everything, and I'm like, okay, what's your problem? So they were creating uh, the idea is like they have an AI tool, writing tool for everyone. And I'm like, wait, everyone? Like, how is, like, is it for writers? Is it for journalists? For book authors? They're like, no, anyone can use it. I'm like, why can't they just use another LLMs? And they were like, no, I'm gonna sell it. So I was like, okay, how many customers you have spoken with? I was like, no, this is what I think. So, and that's when I was like, wait, you have to go through that process. You have not spoken. And another founder I've spoken with yesterday, actually, she is building an AI learning platform, and she has been a professor and everything, so she know that people need to know. But she had a website and all those things, and she was going and she was asking, what should be my path? Like, should I go and go to VC and raise money, or should I hire team members? I'm like, wait, but how many people you have spoken with? Because she was developing that platform for elderly people, so it was 60 plus. She was like, no, I have not. I know this is a problem. And I was like, so those are the examples. And last month, I've spoken to one of the founders. She was working on a product, on an app, which was more on the mental health. So for example, if someone has like anxiety, depression and all that, with the sound, it will customize songs for you, like a mix of like Spotify plus Calm. And it's been like 4 or 5 months, and they're trying to raise money. And I'm like, you're raising money, so how many pilot customers do you have? They're like, oh, we don't have any pilot customer. We need money to develop that wearable device. So it's like, so that's the trend yeah.
Yeah, so honestly, what I'm hearing from you is that I think this is a common issue, not just in startups. I think it's actually present in enterprise where somebody has an idea and they are so convinced that there's a market for their idea because it's so obvious to them. Like they
Yep.
cannot unsee what they know, and they're using it as a shortcut to there must be a market. And I will even go so far as to say this isn't just product people, this is a lot of people in other departments making shortcut assumptions
Hmm.
because they can't unknow what they know, and so they think other people also think this way. And
That's
I think that's a really tough uh, issue. And I don't know, what do you say to people? Okay, I understand you're pushing them like you need to talk to your customers, you need to get somebody to actually pay for your solution.
mhm.
Obviously that's step 1. But do you see any success? Like are people able to turn this around?
Yeah. So, one quick example. So, one of the founders that I was helping, they did went through before I started advising them. So, they built the product without, talking to many customers. They bootstrapped it. They had like development team building the product and all those things. And guess what? No one wanted to buy that product because, you do not speak to customers. And now they are trying to start from scratch. And now, uh, so I'm helping and guiding them to like, okay, who are your customers? Target customers are. So they are trying to find who I can tap into. And I'm giving them like and I want founders to think about 6 months. I'm going to interview customers. So that's one of the goals. Like, okay, interview at least 500 customers if you can, 1,000 customers, as much as you can. So that way you have different perspective and what are you learning from those interviews, right? So I try to help them identify the categories. And sometimes founders like, oh, I'm seeing the pattern, like 60% of the customer have the same issue and there is no solution to that. And that's when they like go and build the product. That's when they can test the hypothesis, like what they were thinking. And founders like, oh, what solution I was thinking, that was not they even wanted. So it's having more conversation from the customers. And then so spend more time in planning, as we all know, 80/20 rule. So I want them to spend more time. So this founder was spending time with customers. Then second thing is alpha stage. They know, okay, 160% of the customer want this one thing. They started building alpha stage, meaning, having those focus groups like, hey, if I build this, do you want it? And they'll test it out, right? As a pilot. Then they started getting that feedback loop. And that's most important. Like, even if you feel like don't launch MVP, don't launch the full-fledged product. Once you have that conversation with the customers, test and see if they're liking or not, or what's lacking, right? That's the beta stage. I help the founders, and founders don't have that idea like, oh, I have to go through multiple steps to go to MVP. And then that's when you are broadening your focus from your internal network to your external customers. And when he started like, oh, in beta stage I am getting like feedback from different customers I've never thought of. And then when we gather those feedback, and that will give a sense of like what kind of MVP we should build. So having that path, and that's where I'll tell founders, like, if you want to use prototypes, that's when you use Lovable, that you don't have to spend and invest in development or time and effort. Test your hypothesis, test your idea, proof of concept. If you have that, that's when you can think of MVP development. So having that saves a lot of time. And the founders like, oh, we did not think that way. We were just like wanting to add a sales team, we wanting to hire some engineers or co-founders and start building the full-fledged product.
So you think that there's just this general I'm trying to think of the right word here, but I guess it's almost like naivety around I have this idea, it's going to work, that build it, they will come kind of mindset.
Yeah.
And you seem to, come across it quite a bit. So the answer to that mindset is you need to test. The underlying assumption is that I am the market. And so
Yep.
you need to go and talk to your market to say whether or not that assumption proves out. And I mean, has it ever proven out? I don't think I know of an example where that has most of the time you're wrong, right? You have to be comfortable with being wrong with this. And okay, so then you talk to the market, and tell me about, like, at what point do you think that this kind of founder, this idea is deserving of I have found the product market fit label? Like, when does that happen?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, taking this example of the founder, like where they're trying to build the healthcare app. And when I say founders, like, so few points. So, go and talk to the customers and see that whether they want it. And they're like, oh, yeah, this is a problem, right? That shows like that's a proof of concept. You validated that that's a problem. And now you have to build a product that will, they want to use, the customers want to use at the end of the day, right? When I say, I give this guidance to the founders, like when you say product market fit, I'm like, this is not something, don't say that, hey, have I achieved product market fit? I was like, I want to see the evidence. Do you have the data points that shows your product market fit? So product market fit is nothing but that the customers are having some problem and you are trying to say solve that pain points. But at the end of the day, are customers coming to your product again and again? Are you able to retain your customers? Are you able to generate the revenue from the customers? Meaning the customers will go on your, let's say if it's a SaaS product, they'll go and play around with the website, but I'll just spend 5 minutes and I'm done. Your product should be solving a problem where the customers are spending most of the time on your website, right? So customer acquisition, are you spending money to acquire customers, right? And they're there, they're spending time. um, I want the customers to renew if they're paying for a month, right? Most of the time, founders try to bring customers for a month, like, hey, this is a free one, first month free. Are the customers willing to pay money every month or every year to use your product? If they are ready to pay money to use your product, that means you're solving a problem and they are ready to pay. They want.
Well, okay, let me push on this. Like, what percentage of customers renewal? Like, what's your benchmark that you recommend people follow? Because
That's
there are lots of these,
yeah.
obviously these metrics.
That's great. So there is like one metric, and I'll tell like so let me tell you I would say 60 to 70% of the customers, that's a benchmark. If you have early adopters and they're trying to pay money, that's a good benchmark that says like, okay, you're solving a problem. I also tell them to use another Sean Ellis rule, which is like 40% rule, meaning if you have customers and if you say the next day, hey, we are going to discontinue this product, if 40% of the customers are going to get disappointed, that means you have achieved your product market fit. So those are a couple of metrics. The other metrics I can use is thinking about how many customers are renewing. So it can be 40 to 50% of the customers. Oh, so half of the customers are renewing, how much time they're spending. And the other thing I would say, the churn rate, right? If customers are just there for like 3 months and they're not renewing anymore and they're dropping out, and I always give this example of Clubhouse. So Clubhouse, 7, 8 years ago, it was a hype,
Ooh,
invitation only,
that's the
and
throwback now, isn't it? Like,
and it's like six, and it's like people were like crazy about it, just wanted, like, we were like, oh, this product is great, it will be attracting investors and all those things, but it did not like sustain, right? And we know the churn rate. So I always tell founders, like, think about how you want to keep on growing and not just like a initial enthusiasm from the customers.
yeah. I mean, I think a lot of, and rightfully so, a lot of product people should be focused on churn because with, I think anything of I think even 6% churn for some companies is really scary. Like you can't really build a business. And
Yeah.
so if you're starting out, I mean, when you start out, you expect higher rates of churn, right? Your product isn't fully there. You obviously have not fulfilled or satisfied the needs of every part of every core part of your market's need. But that makes me think, have you ever been in a situation where like you've been advising a startup and they found product market fit or they thought they did but they didn't and suddenly churn exceeded the bench. I don't know what you said. Did you say like 60% of your customers
Yeah.
renew? I guess that makes sense in the early stage. Probably want closer to 90-95% renew, but yeah. So
Yeah.
has that ever happened where suddenly there's like a big drop off?
Yes. So yeah, there was one of the founders that I was working with, and they thought like, so I'll give you a quick context. So they were trying to create, the planners, right, where you can write in the notes on the book, and you can and it will automatically put it in the cloud. So you don't have to like, type it out. So that was like the product. And initially they thought that they have achieved the product market fit, but they were like, oh, everyone can use it, everyone is taking notes, whether you're students, you're professionals, you're working, you're going out into events, you want to take notes, and it can be for everyone. So they started talking, and people were like, yeah, I would use it, I can write in the book, and it's already putting in the cloud, so I don't have to do anything else. I'm just going to carry and I can use it. So you have like unlimited use with the pen and the book. And what happened was, um, when they started, like, they thought they have achieved the product market fit. When they started launching couple of, the pilot, they did like, they had a couple of 2 to 3 pilots, and they realized people are not using the product that often. It has been, the adoption rate was very slow. And when I started talking to the founder, they were like, oh yeah, I have 3 4 pilot customers, but they're not using that often. So I'm like, okay, let's see what we have to pivot. And then the pivot was, oh, not everyone, students will not, and the cost as well, right? So someone don't want to pay like $400 $500 for that one particular book and pen, right? I mean, we have
Wait,
iPad.
they were selling to students
Yeah, so exactly, the initial
for
was like,
$400?
yeah,
What students have $400?
exactly. They were like, they would not be paying it. They have iPad, and that's when I want them to think, and I was like, competitive edge, like, okay, how you are competing with iPad. Like, they're just going to take notes and it's going to be there. I don't need something to upload on my iCloud, it's already there. So then that's when I started making them think, like, you can't sell a student or early, early professionals can buy it, but your target audience is not there. You don't know who is your target audience. Everyone can't be your target audience, right? That means you still have to. That's when, to your question, I we had some sessions and I wanted to think, and they were like, okay, I'm gonna pick one audience. So they are targeting in the enterprise for people who can pay money. who can buy licenses and all those things. So now it's for admin and early professionals in the enterprise. So completely changed the path, and still they are in the trial phase. They're still piloting, but how we the founders
Yeah.
got to what they are. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so hard with some of these retail, and I don't know if you saw, I was kind of smiling a little. Oh, I was definitely smiling internally because my husband has gone through, I don't know, 7 note-taking apps in like a year because this is a perennial
Yes.
problem for
Mhm.
everyone. But then there's also pretty low switching costs to those things. Um, yeah, it's hard for those retail like ideas where I am the market as a unique individual, but you can't build for that. Like that's not something you can do. And it's not always obvious, well, what's our ideal customer profile? Like what makes us differentiated? And I like that you said that you kind of force them to pick, even if in the end they might not end up in that space of like admin enterprise
Mhm.
professionals, but
Mhm.
they're going to learn so much just on focusing the needs of that unique segment that it's going to really help them maybe refine that over time and build the right product. And
Exactly. Mhm.
yeah, doesn't it take a lot more time to do this than people kind of think? They think like, oh, it'll take me a couple months to launch, as you were saying, but to really get a true product out in the market that's has longevity, it takes time. It takes a lot of iteration. It takes a lot of rework and rethinking. Do you see that with founders? Or are they, a little bit maybe too optimistic at the start?
They are. So that's an interesting. First of all, like when they learn that, oh, I don't want to launch right away because you know what, and I'll get back to what you were asking. So I think there is a lot of competition as well. Like, founders are like, oh, there are AI tools and everyone is launching. There are 100 startups popping up right and left, right? And they're like, oh, we want to launch as fast as we can. And that's the mindset they have, and that's the whole reason they're like, oh, we don't have to talk to customers, or I have spoken to 5 customers, I think that's enough, I can launch it. So those assumptions come into the play when I talk to the founders. But um, when I tell them like it's okay to take time, it's okay if there are like 5 other startups are popping up who are in the same area, in the same space or domain, I tell them this thing like value prop. Even if you have to wait 6 months to launch your product, it's okay because you're spending your time to know that this is what the customers want. You don't want to spend your if you're bootstrapping your engineers, your time, your energy, because most of the time, the founders I work with, they are doing full-time job plus a side hustle, or they have left their job to build their startups. So if they're bootstrapping, they don't want to spend like 6 7 months in building a product, or spending in their money to build something that no one wants. So when they realize, oh, I can wait but I'm not losing my market, I'm making my position strong, I'm making my product stand out. When they realize it's going to help them down the line, that's when they're ready to like take a step back. They're like, okay, let me build the product, let me go and talk to the customers, let me see. And one of the things sometimes when I saw founders don't do a lot of research, and I understand not all the founders are from the research background, non-technical and all those things, but also understanding what the products are in the market, whether it's startup companies or enterprises, that help them to think what kind of questions they want to ask customers. So I always tell them, like, when you go and talk to customers, ask which product they're using at the moment and what they like about that. And if they want to use a different product, what would make them to switch to another product. So that gives them a sense like, oh, why they're still paying for this current existing product, and how I can make them switch to my product. So all those questions are nothing but a strategy to make them launch something that people will pay.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want to spend 2 months launching something nobody wants, or 6 months launching something that you actually can get traction in the market? And yeah, if you think that you know everything without talking to your market, you're gonna be in the camp that fails. So I'm glad you're actually helping people like think through these kinds of
Mhm.
decisions, because it's not easy to be an entrepreneur. It's not easy to make that call of like, I'm gonna forego my job, or I'm even gonna put my job at risk if I do something on the side. um you have to like, it's that's a okay, people like to say like entrepreneurs like risk, but you also have like a different understanding of how risky that is because it's also risky to not go after your dreams as
Exactly.
an individual. All
I
right, but go ahead.
No, and that's a great. I love what you said. Like it's so risky to not go behind your dreams because like when I do some startup showcases or talk to founders, I have seen they're like, oh, I have this idea for past 2 years, past 3 years. I've never worked on my idea. I have that idea. I want to work on it. And when I see when they say that passion and they are not able to work on it, it's very risky. Down the line they don't want to like, oh, why did not I try this? I so it's very important to like take that jump and work on your idea sometimes.
Yeah, but it is hard and do it thoughtfully with
Yeah.
intention. And that kind of brings me to the next part of all right, it sounds like you're working with a lot of really early stage, often maybe companies of one. And I think that's going to be more and more common, obviously, with AI tools enabling an
Mhm.
individual to do a lot more, right? Um, what point do you think companies are ready to actually go to market?
That's a great point because go to market I think comes in when you have a product market fit. So thinking about when you have proof of concept, you go and develop your product market fit, customers are going to pay for your product and you have proven your idea in one market. So for example, as a founder, I have seen that they are targeting initially in the US market and they have customers paying for the product. They have retained the product, the customers, there's no churn rate. And they were like, okay, now I can expand. And go to market is nothing but thinking of how you can expand, right? It's about growing in whether different markets, different features. I always tell there are few building blocks that I want that I suggest to founders. Meaning, first of all, it's who is your ICP, meaning ideal customer profile. The product that you have in the US might not be the product that they want to use in India. So, for example, I was talking to one of the founders, and they were trying to build a product. So, telehealth here in the US, you talk to the physicians. They were trying to build a physical product where you can scan, you can take temperature, and the doctor can see on the
Mhm.
other end. But in India, you need to have the Wi-Fi, you need to have the technology infrastructure to be able to use that. So that's one thing. You need to understand your market where you're going to expand. The third thing is like how you are positioning your product, meaning what's the messaging you are trying to use. And I'll give a couple of examples. The third thing is, do you have marketing in the sales channel? Meaning, if you're expanding into a different market, different regions, you need to have a champion in that market. So for example, if someone is launching in India, China, Europe, you need to have someone who you can talk to and help understand the buying habits. I mean, yes, you have to do the research, but also you need to have someone who can take care in that market. The other thing I would say, on the pricing, the marketing, the sales, and the distribution. I think even if you have the product, can you distribute, can you scale? So last thing I would say, as a founder, as someone who is an enterprise, when we think of go to market, thinking about the operational readiness. So different time zones, like do you have compliances in place, given if it's a healthcare industry, fintech, or the legal tech. There are rules and regulations in each regions, like different countries. Do you have those in place before you even go and thinking of expanding? And the last thing I would say is, when you try to scale, you need to have your team in place. Meaning, do you have enough resources on in place? You have engineers if you're trying to scale, if you have sales and the marketing team that can help and sell and demo your product, and the customer success team who can onboard if you have new customers coming in. That would make a journey simple and smooth.
Yeah. So just in hearing you talk, I calls to mind an example. I remember this is way man already 10 years ago at business school. We had a case where we were talking about like Walmart as a retail, like big box retail expanding into Germany. And I remember raising my hand because I lived in Germany for a year. And I was like, this is never going to work. Why? Because in Germany, they shop on the bike they have a little basket. Like they're not doing what, Americans are doing in a minivan. So you really need to understand like the consumer in that region. And to your point, it's really important to have somebody who actually lives there and understands the culture and buying behaviors, because they are so different. And also the regulation, right? Like in the US, um, there's a there's this, like, we have a litigious culture around, if somebody makes a mistake, it's really about managing the liability of that litigation, versus I think in Europe it's preventative. It's like making sure there's hyper compliance and regulation to prevent any kind of errors. So it's that those definitely impact your product and your strategy in each of those regions.
Yeah.
But I didn't really hear from you. Like, oh, did you want to respond to that?
No, that's great. Yeah, I was going to add one example. So one of the founders was talking to, and they were creating this mental health app or wellness app for students, like who have this anxiety or like kind of like struggles when they're studying or when they are like trying to find jobs, and the initial target was in the US, like the initial market is in the US, and they want to do it in India. So they, as we spoke about, like they have to change some messaging. So in India, like growing up in India, like if you'll say, hey, I need help, they're like, no, go study, just giving an excuse to not study. So you have to position in that way there, where the parents will be willing to pay for the product. You have to show that, hey, this is for mental resilience, this is for like your confidence building, that will make your product sell. So how you even position your product, that's the most important thing,
Yeah,
rather
I
than
like
just
that positioning better, by the way, too. Like, this is for your resilience. I kind of want that in the US too.
Yeah, so
That's
how you like make your product sound in a way, like again, like different industries have different. Airbnb, for example, I think they did the same thing when they launched in China. It was more for they were more what in China market, it was more of a like safety and trust, and that's why they focus on more the safety and the trust. I mean everywhere, but like understanding what will be sticky for people in the different countries or different region will help you make sale of your product.
And does it mean that like you also have to think not just about what we're talking about here in terms of buying behavior, but also the channels that you use? Is it different depending on the region?
Yeah, so different channels. So for example, yeah, so you need to understand, rather than just going like, hey, I'm gonna sell my product in this market, you need to like I tell founders to identify who you can tap into. Is it some partners? Just for example, if picking the example of the founder who is trying to launch this app for students, like can they partner with the universities? Can they partner with any organizations who the parents come and talk, so that way they're not reinventing the wheel, but they have some partners and distribution channel. Because think about this way, they have a community already, and you are just going into the community that, hey, can you spread the word, rather than you're going one to one person, right?
Mhm.
So you're thinking of which partners, and that's another strategy for the go to market. You want to partner with people who will help you either creating visibility of your product, where they can help you with the organic growth. Second thing, can they help you with marketing and distribution? I have seen this cross pollination as well. Like some like startup founders who are in India, they're trying to have partners in the US market and in the Europe, right? Same thing, founders who are in the US, if they're trying to expand, they try to make partnerships in the African market, in the Europe. So rather than just going blindly into a new region, have conversation. And I also saw this like one founder who traveled, they wanted to expand in India. So they traveled to India, they stayed there for 3 months, and they went around and see who they can partner with. They went and saw the market. So that's another way where you can actually see how the customers in a different market will react to your product, or is that even a right market for you to expand.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's probably no better way than that, like very high fidelity
Exactly.
experiment of just actually going and like I think we keep coming back to the same theme here, is that it's really important to actually talk and be with your market.
Mhm.
So given everything that we're talking about, and I feel like you've shared a lot of advice so far, but can we extrapolate that to, like, let's say rather than a founder but a product leader, what advice would you give to product leaders about, building for a market maybe they don't yet understand?
Yeah, I love that question because I'll give you an example and then I'll tap into. So I spoke with, I was in California 2 months ago and I spoke to this founder. They have a legal tech company and they were customers. They didn't like, the company that they were working with, and they were like, you know what, I'm going to solve the problem. So they built a company, the startup company, and now it's been 5 years. They have $40 million, and he does not have legal background, but he hired people with the domain knowledge and expertise. So
Mhm.
that's one example. Like, if you don't have, as a product leader, you can hire or work with domain experts, 3 to 5, who can provide you insights. The second thing is, as a product leader, you can observe and listen and study how to solve the problems, right? And going back to the example, I love, if you can, as a product leader, you can go and visit your customers, shadow them, see what struggles they have, or sit in the support calls, right? Sit in the calls if they're having with the customers, will give you some insight. Um, the third thing I would say is, try to experiment. If you're trying to tap into a new market, trying to do some pilot and not fully launching your product, but being open to doing some small experiments to explore and see, okay, is this a real problem or this is what I was thinking. That will give them some insight. And the fourth thing I would say is, test if the product has been incorporated in one of the workflows, see how the user journey looks like, and is your idea or problem that you're trying to solve will really help them in their long term. And the last thing I would say, willingness, be open to the customers and the market, and try to see and ask those hard questions, whether they're willing to pay, whether they are looking to change the workflow, whether they're going to trust this, and have those conversations. And it will give you a whole bunch of insights, whether it is right market or do I need to work with other domain expertise to still pursue that customer.
If you can only do one of those things, which one would it be?
One of those between,
Because I think get the general sense that the advice is, okay, I really like the hire some, higher end domain expertise. Though I will say the problem there sometimes is you don't know what you don't know. So how do you know you're getting the right advice?
exactly.
Right. But
Mhm.
that's why, to your point, 3 to 5, not just one.
Not
Right.
just one, yeah. I would say the domain expertise. And I've seen this trend, to your question. Yes, not have only one, have like 3 to 5 domain experts. That way, it's good to have different opinions and you're not just sticking with one. Sometimes when they brainstorm, you're like, okay, this person is saying this one and this. So that makes you think like, oh, which path? I have seen this in many other founders, like when I talk to founders, not everyone is from the domain, right? Sometimes they see a problem, they're like, I want to solve a problem. Sometimes they have a domain expertise, but still they hire people who are experts, like 30, 50 years of experience. So I would go with having a committee or, domain expert who can provide you advice.
Okay, let's go with that one. I like that one a lot.
Mhm.
All right, Shweta, thank you so much for joining me today. How can our listeners follow you after they hear this recording?
Yeah, they can follow me on LinkedIn. Shweta Agrawal is it find. And thank you, Rina, for having me. Had like amazing time chatting with you. A wonderful conversation.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. And thanks everyone for tuning into another episode of Productside Stories. If you found our conversation valuable today, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend and make sure to subscribe to Productside Stories so you don't miss a future episode. Thank you for tuning into Productside Stories. I hope today's insights inspire you and propel your product journey forward. Remember, every challenge is a lesson waiting to be learned. And you can also visit us at productside.com for more free resources like webinars, templates, playbooks, and other product wisdom repackaged for you. I'm Rina Alexin, and until next time, keep innovating, keep leading, and keep creating stories worth sharing.